Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first healthcare meetup. Today, I'm gonna speak about what's HIPAA and how do we implement it. In next few minutes, I will be covering what it is, what are the basic components of HIPAA, and how do we translate this HIPAA components into our development workflow. Uh, a bit introduction about myself. I'm Gaurav Porwal. I'm an associate director of engineering at GeekyAnts. I'm a tech enthusiast and love building products using cutting edge technologies. Over the weekend, you can find me roaming around with my laptop and googling something and learning new things. Even my wife calls my laptop as my second wife. All right. So moving on. So the big thing. What is HIPAA? HIPAA basically stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability. And that's it. That's HIPAA. I know you guys will be thinking, could you please elaborate? So the basic definition of HIPAA is something like this. HIPAA is an act which was established in 96. It's a federal law that establishes data and privacy security for government organizations. It protects confidentiality and security of health data by enforcing standards. It also improves efficiency in healthcare delivery by standardizing electronic data interchange. Yeah, I guess that's simple, right? So those were the basic definition. Let me clarify what actually HIPAA means, like in simple terms. So in HIPAA, what things are included is the encryption of the data, like end to end, everything should be encrypted. Then we should be respecting user privacy. It also lays down rules and regulation how the logging of all the PHI data should be done. It helps you set up the control processes across the industries. It laid down the guidance of storing audit data. It makes sure that the data which you are accessing are from the authorized users, and unauthorized user has been put into different bracket, right? It laid down the policies for the password which are standardized across the industry and which is very difficult to crack. It also enforces the encrypted data backups, and last but not the least, having a disaster recovery plan in place. So whenever there is a attempt to data breach, we can alert them to the respective department, and they can take adequate actions within a minute, right? So if we try to understand HIPAA, it basically says that you don't have to store anything, play English text into the database, but rather encrypt them, store them behind the database, and also make sure that the database is behind a solid infrastructure which is highly scalable and secure, right? So that nobody from the outside world can access the data. So that basically the main job of the HIPAA, right? So, talking about what are the goals of HIPAA. First, there are like two primary purpose of HIPAA. One is to secure personal health information, and second is to establish standardization for the electronic transmission of health and information. So yeah, that's a big boom once the HIPAA compliance was established in after 1996. What are the key benefit which HIPAA has provided is that the way hospitals or the organization are exchanging information of the users, right? Because of the HIPAA strict guidelines and rules, there is lot of standardization and lot of privacy has put into picture, and privacy plays a very big role in HIPAA compliance, and they are being taking at P1 priority for it. Right? Also, HIPAA has helped us to enhance the electronic and physical security of personal and health information, which is, I believe, like nowadays everybody is concerned whether data is secure or not. So HIPAA makes sure of that. Right. HIPAA has also helped in reducing healthcare fraud and abuses. Because since the data is secure and it has educating the people how to use those things, right, and everything is behind a secure wall kind of thing. So the frauds which are taking place in the healthcare industry are drastically decreasing due to HIPAA compliances. Last or not but not the least, because of the standardized protocols which HIPAA compliance has established, it has simplified the billing and other transactions which happens between hospital to hospital or between organization to organization. So it is very easy and seamless in with the implementation of the HIPAA compliances. So in terms, if I summarize everything, HIPAA compliance basically make our data is safe and secure, and we can freely sleep in the night without worrying about what will happen to my medical records or to my personal information. So, moving on to other topics, let me just explain what is protected health information. So, I've been talking a lot about like encryption data and securing the personal information. But what comes under PHI? What we need to be protected, right? So PHA is the information in a medical record of an individual. This simply means that any medical history which we are capturing from the user, it comes as part of PHI. This information can be created, used, or disclosed in the course of providing a healthcare service, which means that even the conversation which you are doing with your patient and between the doctor, that also part of PHI. Even the billing, billing, or your prescriptions, everything are part of PHI. The PHI also has two forms, mainly the physical and the digital form. If it is digital, then it is called ePHI. So some of the few common example of PHI are MRI scan, blood test results, billing information from your doctor, appointment scheduling notes. Even nowadays, the smartphone who are capturing your number of calories or number of steps using smartphones, right? That also come as part of PHI. So everything which is under PHI has to follow all the HIPAA compliance, and that has to be protected and make it very secure. Now let's talk about what are the building blocks of HIPAA, right? What are the main pillars on which the HIPAA compliance are built on? But before jumping onto that, let me just clarify that there's no HIPAA certification which you'll get it, right? But HIPAA is basically a governing body who has laid down few rules and guidelines which individual or a organization has to follow. And if any violation of the rule, then this governing body has the authority to audit your infrastructure, audit your databases, audit your web application, and if they find you guilty, then they can even put financial penalties on you, right? So this is basically a governing body who has laid down few rules and guidelines. Now let's just talk about what are the main building blocks of HIPAA compliances. First rule is privacy. So privacy basically means that you should not be sharing any of the confidentiality information with of any user, which can be a patient, doctor, or basically meaning that any PHI data you should not be sharing without proper check, right? And privacy means like you can have your medical records, bills, subscription, conversation between doctors or healthcare executives, right? So all this comes as part of privacy, and privacy is a number one priority in HIPAA compliances. Second is the security of this thing, right? No unauthorized user should be able to access your data. Only the authorized user should be able to do it, right? So HIPAA compliance has put out some rules and regulations on which every organization or the web portal has to follow those security checks if they want to be a HIPAA compliant, right? And this HIPAA compliant basically means like in the security, it means like if somebody is able to access an physical area also who is not supposed to do it, that also a breach of a security. So these all aspects like physical area, digital documents, or the data of PHI data should be kept secure as much as possible. The next is enforcement rule. Enforcement rule basically says that any business authority or the your stakeholder who are part of your organization should also follow the HIPAA compliances, meaning that the business partners who are helping you build your infrastructure, or let's say you are deploying your application to AWS cloud, right? So AWS also should be responsible of implementing HIPAA compliances, right? And this enforcement rule enables that. Enforcement rule also helps you lay down the rules and guidelines. What if and also the measures, like if any security breach happen, what are the steps we need to take, or what are the ways to evaluate there's a security breach. So it also laid down some of the ground rules for security breach as well. Last but not the least, breach notification rule. So this rule basically helps you notify if there is a security breach in your infrastructure, right? So let's suppose if some another user is able to access your data, then a notification has to be sent to your security team as well as to the user, that somebody is trying to access your account, or somebody is giving you wrong password for, let's say, a couple of 2 or 3 times, right? So then the security breach rule says that you should send a notification or a email or some way you should communicate to your end user saying that somebody is trying to access your account. So these all four things, which includes privacy rule, security rule, enforcement rule, and breach notification rule, combined together forms a HIPAA compliance. And these are the four major pillars of HIPAA. If somebody has to be HIPAA compliant, then they have to follow all these rules and guidelines laid by HIPAA compliance. Moving on, so we have till now we have discussed about what are the rules and regulation which we need to follow, but how do we apply these rules to? So basically we have different means of web portals which the end user interact with, and these web portals can be as simple as hospital or doctor website, or a bit complicated like patient portal or online pharmacy, treatment or therapy applications, or on mobile healthcare apps, or nowadays the smartwatches. All these are the different modes on which we need to apply the HIPAA compliances. Now, how do we do that? So, in order to do that, I have divided the HIPAA compliances into three tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And based on the complexity of the application, there are different variation of HIPAA implementation. So, we'll look into the next slides. The first slide is tier 1. This basically means that all the static website or non-HIPAA compliant portals, like who is just sharing information, like a hospital website who is telling what are the facilities it provides, right? They come under tier 1. And in this typical websites, what information we generally capture is the we generally signs a agreement or a onboarding form we fill up, right? So that's the only data which these websites are capturing. So in order to make it HIPAA compliant, what we can do is like we can add a SSL certificate to your website. So what SSL certificate does is it encrypts all your data which is going through your network, right? So that it becomes very difficult for the hackers to identify what data or what information has been relayed from your website to your uh, to the internet. Also, please note that in tier 1 websites we are not storing any information related to the user into our web server. If you want to send data or anything, we can use HIPAA compliant email boxes which will directly send an email to the user, and it will also keep a record of it. But we are not storing any data to our server. And those kind of websites or user interfaces or the applications uh, lie under tier 1 HIPAA compliance. Then there is a second type of web application which are web apps that stores data. For example, online pharmacies or treatment portals, right? So like first step is basically like put the SSL certificate so that at least the data which is going over the network is secured. But there are additional steps which we need put in place. Is the first, and which is very major, is hosting environment like AWS or Google or Azure portal, right? This all has to be HIPAA compliant. And what I mean by that this the web application where we are storing our data, right, has to be behind a private VPN or behind a private firewall which is protecting our data. And this data has to be dump into encrypted databases. If there's a media file like image or video or file medical history, those has to be encrypted using file store. And AWS has a lot of good services which by default are HIPAA compliant. For example, in S3 bucket, you can enable the encryption protocol, which will make sure that all the files which are uploaded onto the S3 bucket are encrypted by default and which are shared over the network. Now moving on to the third tier, this one is bit extension of the tier 2. In here, what we are saying is that the application can retrieve the data plus as well as we can edit the data. Meaning that was, for example, you have a online telemedicine, so the healthcare doctor can update the medical history of the user. So it is retrieving data as well as it is updating the stages of the patient, right? For example, the patient was diagnosed with diabetic 1, then it was then it was moved, then it was diagnosed to stage 2. So these are the updation which the doctor can do it, right? So all the such application where we are fetching the data, storing the data, and as well as editing the data are comes under tier 3. So the normals, as usual, like you have to add like SSL certificate, hosting environment should be HIPAA compliant, right? You should have the encrypted database, file stores, everything, right? That's what we have discussed previously. But along with that, we should also be adding user level monitoring and logging system, so that we should to see what kind of writes we are doing into our database, right? And also we should add a proper authorization check, like who is trying to access which record. So all those checks has to be added into our application layer as well as the database layer. Along with that, there should be a disaster recovery system should be set up, because let's say if there is a breach happen, then our disaster recovery should alert our security team and they should shut down the AWS cloud immediately, so that nobody can access our databases. So such system has to be there. And this is how we are implementing the HIPAA compliance based on different types of application. Same implementation will not be there for each and every. There are the different variations are there, right? Uh, Moving on. So let's just think from now architecture point of view, right? How do we implement these things? What are the checklists which we should be considering when we are building any application? The first and the foremost is like access control safeguard, which is nothing but an authentication check. So what it does is like you should have a login page before even allowing a user to enter your web application, right? And each patient or doctor should be linked to a unique UUID. This UUID should be unreadable and should not be predictable. For example, if you assign a patient A as integer id 1 or patient B as integer id 2, so this becomes predictable and this is easily hackable. So you should make sure that the uh, database which you are using is using unique UUID, and everywhere in the database you are referring the user with the UUID rather than using the actual username or credential. Also we should be using encrypted data fields. For example, whenever we are storing the password of the user, we should make sure that we are using the plain text and making a hash value out of it, and that hash value we are storing into the database. We are not storing directly the raw password which the user is sending. So that's the encryption thing. And third thing which we can follow is like role based data access, that is putting a proper permission check, scope check, role check at both application and at the database layer, so that we'll know that if some user A is trying to access the data of other user, then we can restrict them. For example, if a receptionist is trying to view the patient record, then they should only be seeing with the record which they are assigned to. They should not be seeing whole organization database, right? So those are the role based access check which we should put in place. A simple example of it is like I have put it as some Firebase collection. I'm showing a user profile and a record, right? So, and I'm putting a security rule that the user should be authenticated. That is auth at line number 22. If you see that auth is not equal to null, and also the request which is coming in should match with their own user ID. So that's a simple rule which you should put in place whenever you're deploying your data to the production, right? So that it ensures that user is able to access their own data, not any other's data. Moving on, the second is the security check. Like one thing which we discuss about is the log, right? That is not sufficient in today's time. We should be also be enabling two-factor authentication. If user is putting email and password to log in, then there should be an OTP to be sent to their mobile number, or a push notification has to be sent over the email, right? Who the user has to check and authorize themselves that yes, I am the correct person and I am verifying myself at two places. So this reduces a lot of chances that user credentials are compromised. Second is that we should use the in build capability of the operating system. For example, whenever we are building a phone application, right, a mobile app, we should make sure that we are using the face ID lock or the pin code or the fingerprint lock, right, which are pre-built in the OS operating system itself, right? Those are the security which the operating system is providing to us. So that is very necessary when we are building such secure systems, right? Also, we should make sure that when any sensitive information of user, let's say a token or the password or the bank details, are not saved into the local storage, but rather we should use a keychain, which is a much more secure way of storing the data onto your mobile phones. Thirdly, there is a chance that sometimes the application or the phone can get lost, right? So there should be a capability in the mobile phone to wipe out all the data remotely, even if the phone is lost, right? So these all are the guidelines we should put in place when we are doing any development for a HIPAA compliant application. Next is the hosting environment. In the hosting environment, what we should mainly focus is firewall and the security aspect of it. Like we can put a transit gateway which will be talking to the internet, and all the requests will be coming to one single port, which is our gateway, and gateway will talk to our VPN subnets, right? No outside world can talk to our subnets directly. Only the gateway which we are establishing, which we are putting place, is talking to the subnets, right? Along with the VPN, we should be also having the databases which are by default encrypted, file storage, right? These are the common things which we can put in place. The main thing which we should also be focusing on is onto the deployment pipeline. Many times whenever we are deploying the code using CI/CD pipelines, right, we hard code the security rules in there, right, or security sensitive information we hard code in the build pipeline itself. But that should not be there. We should ideally use a key vault to retrieve the data, retrieve the key or the config files from a security vault, and then putting into a build pipeline, so that even if our build pipelines are compromised, we know that our config files are kept securely in some other place. This way we are uh, distributing our config into multiple places, which becomes even more difficult for any hacker to hack the things. uh, next is the disaster recovery. So yes, we do know, we even if we set a lot of good infrastructure, right, we put a lot of secure mechanism, but there is a chances that the the hackers are able to breach our secure network due to some leakage, right? So in order to do that, what steps we should be following is that we should have a proper monitoring and logging system. We should also provide forensic level logging. This means that we should be capturing the IP address of the incoming request. We should be capturing a request header, response headers. We should be capturing the what's the byte data payload size which is getting transmitted. So every minute thing we should be capturing in our logs. Along with that, we should also be making sure that our data backup which is happening are all encrypted by default, right? Whenever we are putting a snapshot of the current database, it should be encrypted and kept somewhere, and the encryption key should be kept in the key vault. Next is the monitoring file changes using an intrusion prevention services, and also we should be establishing a push notification services, so that we should be able to alert the respective department whenever there is a data breach. Let's just look at few of the services which is available right now in the cloud environment, such as and which are by default HIPAA compliant, right? For example, we have Amazon EC2 instance, EBS, Elastic Load Balancing, S3, Amazon DynamoDB, Redis. All these services which Amazon is providing are by default HIPAA compliant. That means whatever the things which we have discussed so far are by default available in this cloud service, and you just have to go and enable the config files. That as is easy as it is. um, Along with the AWS, we I have also listed on few of the reference links like AWS, Google. You can even look at the developer guideline, which tells you what are the best practices when implementing HIPAA compliances. Also, I have shared a link which helps you integrate the MongoDB with your application, how you can make the MongoDB uh, HIPAA compliant, right? So yeah, that's all from my end. uh Thank you so much.